Go ahead, Anwar.
All right. So, what is it like living under the occupation? So, I lived in Gaza during the first Intifada, which is the first uprising, which was a completely peaceful uprising. People were literally just demonstrating to be treated like human beings, literally just for their dignity. At that point, it was in 1987. Palestine had been occupied now for 40 years. When it started, it was literally at the 40-year mark. And people said enough. It was a new generation. They had enough with the way the occupation was treating them, living conditions, just everything about it, right? Um, and it started out as peaceful. Then, in the occupation, you're not only a second class citizen, you don't even have citizenship rights because you're not recognized as a citizen of the country. That's why they're occupying you. Which means you can't travel, you can't get a proper job without their permission. Um, Resources are extremely controlled, allocated. Living conditions are absolutely terrible. It's funny, if you've seen the Hunger Games, basically whatever district, you know what I mean, the one that,
Yeah.
District 12 or whatever it is,
That's
that's
what my
basically,
14-year-old said. Yeah.
oh,
That's what my 14-year-old
completely,
said. Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
We were there, and you can't even get like regular, like I remember because we moved from the United States, so I was there. I was 8 years old when we moved there, and a lot of the things that we had in America we no longer have over there. So it's a jarring, but despite that, Gaza to me was the most beautiful place on the planet, right? With its beach, its people, the food, the culture, the friends that you make. It's that environment that's just unparalleled. And it saddens me to see, our beautiful city literally being destroyed in front of our eyes. Entire neighborhoods. By the way, I'm seeing like people see buildings. I see places that I recognize and know. Oh, that's a restaurant that we used to go to. That's a place that we used to go. These are neighborhoods. Man, I have friends in those neighborhoods. They're checking up on friends and family. We have in our extended family at least 50 people dead. You know what I mean, in terms of cousins and you know what I mean, just extended. Palestinians, alhamdulillah, they have large families, so it's just it's absolutely like mind-boggling. And this is now, so uh, occupation leading up to this, Palestinians have been, Gaza has been occupied since 1967. Even before 1967, we were run by the Egyptians, right? Why? Because Palestinians weren't allowed self-governance. So literally Egypt was just filling in the role, same like the West Bank. The West Bank was run by Jordan. That's why it's called the West Bank, because Jordan is the East Bank. And you're not even allowed self-governance. You're not even allowed to determine who you want to rule over you. And even now with the Palestinian Authority, they're literally just a puppet regime for the Israelis. They have to carry out, whatever it is that they say and want and stuff like this. So occupation is living in a giant prison. This is what life was like in Gaza. It was a giant prison where a majority of the people could not leave. I was able to leave. I was extremely privileged because I had an American citizenship, a passport that could allow me to travel. And I feel the weight of that privilege because it comes with a responsibility that I hope, inshallah ta'ala, we try to fulfill it. Um, but majority, 99.999% of the people have never left Gaza Strip. Imagine you're born and lived there 20, 30, 40 years of your life. You've never seen anything beyond the walls that confine you within the Gaza Strip, right? Imagine the things that they've never seen before in their lives. They've never seen a river. So Gaza, actually, naturally, there's a place called Wadi Gaza. This is actually the demarcating line that this was the south, this was the north. A wadi is a seasonal river that flows from the hills of Hebron, Al Khalil, which is not too far away actually. These hills, it's a seasonal river. So like in the winter, it'll be flowing itself, and then once the rain stops, there's no more water flow, right? Of course, the Israelis a long time ago siphoned off all that water, so the water doesn't even reach Gaza anymore. Hasn't been reaching it for years, decades. So the aquifer hasn't been replenished in a while. That's why the the water is not suitable for drinking. So when they say we allow them water, what they're doing is that they're allowing them the water that was supposed to be theirs anyways, but that they've been siphoning off for years and years and years. So they've never even seen a river, let alone, you know what I mean? They have the beach, and that's basically it. You're in a giant prison. The difference though between Gaza and a prison, a prison isn't even a good comparison, because in a prison you're guilty of something, where these Palestinians, the only guilty thing they have is that they're Palestinian, right? They were born there. Um, Plus, in a prison, you're allowed trial. These people have never been on trial. In prison, you're not killed and murdered. You know what I mean? You're not. Bombs aren't dropped on you. There's not a prison in the world where bombs are dropped, and then justifiably, you know what I mean? Where it's like America and supposedly the free world telling everybody, yes, we support Israel and its What are you supporting? The killing of people that are living there, innocent civilians, men, women, and children. It's absolutely mind-boggling, wallahi, when you think about it. And yet it's happening live in front of us. And for most of us, there's nothing that we can do about it. It seems like life continues on, and for the people that they literally right now, the only thing that they're asking for is stop the bombing. They've dropped such a large amount of bombs now in Gaza. It's almost equivalent to 2 nuclear bombs. The amount of explosives. 2, not 1, 2 of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the entire Gaza Strip, not just the north, but the south as well. They tell everybody that the south is safe. It's not. This is a lie. They want everybody to believe. So it's just,
that's
yeah.
That's what makes it all the more like unbelievable. Honestly, it's just you have a group of people, they're forced to live in slums, in poverty. They're forced to live an undignified life. And now when these people say that, look, we can't take it anymore. We've done peaceful protests twice already, and all you did was shoot us from the wall. And then on top of that, when now you have a group of people who said, look, we there's no other recourse that we have. There's nothing else we can do to be able to get our humanity back. Then a faction of them, where international law even allows those who have been occupied to take up arms to regain their dignity. So when they do that very thing, how is it? And I don't even know if this is a question, or maybe I can just get your reflection on this. Like, how is it that the world comes together and then stands with the oppressor against the one who's being oppressed? Like, I have no words for it. Naveed, you want to weigh in on that?
It's about narrative, right? So it's about what's the narrative that people have been told, what is that people believe. So here in my local community, I actually attended I was actually one of the speakers for an event on Palestine, where we had 2 actually non-Arab and non-Muslim professors talk about Palestine, right? And I mean, they definitely were pro-Palestinian for sure. However, what I got out of it is there still is this notion that, Hamas is hiding beneath the hospitals, or Hamas is hiding beneath schools, or whatever it might be, right? So because of that, it's justified to because that's what terrorist organizations do, right? So I mean, there's so much to unpack here, right? Like, first of all, the whole history of Hamas. Second of all, there's just what happened on October 7th, like what really happened. And then what you mentioned right now about, it's in international law. If a group of people are occupied for so long, they are able to take up arms. But now it's tricky because at the same time, innocent people did die on the other side, right? I actually there was this Jewish individual who attended the event, and he was actually on our side. He was actually pro-Palestinian. However, he did mention that, innocent people have died on our side, or our side also goes through a lot of terror and fear whenever these things happen, right? So it becomes tricky to kind of, and he was definitely getting emotional when he was talking about it, right? For sure. Even though he's on our side, he completely, he condemns what Israel is doing. However, he lived through, maybe he's had family members that were killed by Hamas, maybe whatever it might be, right? So he has this emotional connection, right? So when you say Hamas is hiding beneath these hospitals, naturally they kind of justify it, right? Or Hamas is beheading kids underneath this school somewhere, right? Or Hamas is hiding in a refugee camp, right? Then that's what I think leads people to justify it, right? Again, I'm not justifying their justification. I'm just explaining where they're coming from, right? And I mean, it's tough. I don't know really how to answer that other than you have to just start with the basic facts, start with international law, start with history, and really rephrase the whole narrative, essentially.
It is. I think you're right. I think people are sold a story and they believe it because they just keep on hearing the same story repeated by so many people that they just assume, like, yeah, everybody's been saying this. So, like, why would I ever question it? But you do have to question it. You do have to question it, especially when you start to see, now a different narrative is coming out. You're like, wait a second, is this not what we're supposed to be doing? That's why it's interesting that support for Israel among the boomer generation 65 and up is like 80%. But now in millennials and Gen Z, it's nowhere near. It's actually more pro-Palestinian than it is pro-Israel. And it's because of that narrative shift. That generation has just been sold an idea for as long as they've been alive. But now, because Gen Z hasn't been told and fed that message as much, and with social media, it's changing their perception. I remember, because we had our American passports, we could travel into Israel itself. My dad would do business because, unfortunately, that's the only way that you can do business. You have to buy from the Israelis, which, by the way, there's an economic incentive in them occupying the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, because now we have to buy everything from them. So you have a customer base that's forced to buy from you. It's literally a monopoly. Over 2 million people in the Gaza Strip, 3 million people in the West Bank, and they have to get all their power, their fuel, their food, their water from you. You know what I mean? There's a huge economic incentive for them. So don't think like we were ever a burden on them. They were making a killing, literally. So, like, my father owned a sports goods business, right, where he would buy soccer balls, cleats, jerseys, even tennis, basketball, whatever it was, basketball shoes, for people in Gaza, right? We were one of only like 4 stores in the entire Gaza. For the average Gazan who's struggling to survive and make ends meet, his kid asks him, Baba, I want a soccer ball. And he's like, no, we need the money for food. It's like, so the soccer ball is going to lose. So it's not that big of a business opportunity. But when things are smooth and calm, people would want outlets. And so this was one of them. And my dad was offering. In fact, my dad was a tennis coach for a very long time in the Gaza Strip. And there's only 3 tennis courts. 2 of them he built himself, designed and showed people how to build, and everything, and got them designed, and they're there. So when he would deal with his Israeli business counterparts who he's buying stuff from, and he would explain how life is in Gaza, they would all be in shock. They're like, what? This is how you guys live? This is what's going on? They have no clue. And these are Israelis. They're sold an idea of, that these Arabs are barbaric. They're all terrorists. They all want, Jews to die, blah, 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 in order for them to back their government in what it does. So in order for you to support your government to doing unthinkable things, you have to assume unthinkable things about your enemy, about your opponent. So these 2 people never interact. The average Israeli has never met a Palestinian under occupation. The average person under occupation has never met an Israeli before, right? And I remember I had a discussion over some kosher food with some rabbis, and I was mentioning this to them. Like I said, do you think if these walls were torn down, and that we could live together, not side by side, but together in the same society? They were both like, oh, no, 2 rabbis. Oh, no, that wouldn't work. But I'm like, why? Do you think like we would? Nobody, I swear to God, not a single Palestinian would care that his neighbor is Jewish. Wallahi, I know this for a fact. Nobody would even blink an eye. Nobody would even care, right? Why don't you guys want? And like, no, in order for it to be a Jewish state, we have to be at least 80%. At least. This is an official Israeli law. They're not even open to the idea. They absolutely not. When I know the average Palestinian, if you tell them right now, tear down the wall, they'd be like, when? Let's go. Let's do this. It's not a problem. Like, in order for Palestinians to exist, we're not calling for the non-existence of Jews or even Israeli or whoever. We're just saying, let us live. Let us live on the same land. We own the keys to those lands. My family has lands that are now occupied 1948. You know what I mean? Acres, like 800 acres of it was agricultural land that they were running and such. So it's this narrative is sold even on the Israelis themselves. They don't even know actually what's going on. They don't. And once they learn, that's why you see a lot of those conscientious objectors, the people that refuse to appear for service. And that's why they had to lie about what Hamas did on October 7th in order to get that popular support. And now that facts are coming
It's
out,
running out.
support is waning because they're realizing, oh wait, what actually happened? What actually took place? You know, one thing I like to do, Manu, if you'll allow me, I know I've been talking for a while. When people ask about, Hamas, do you condemn? I like to ask them, like, okay, so can you tell me what Hamas actually stands for? Like, what's the acronym? People are surprised that it's an actual acronym. They don't know what the acronym actually is. Number one, do you know any of the leaders? Do you know any of the leadership? Have you read like their charter? Anything about them? Do you know their history? No, most people are clueless. Why? Because there's no room for nuance, right? The Israeli side of the narrative, the Zionist side of the narrative, wants you to think that they're savages, they're just bloodthirsty, that about the Palestinians and about any resistance group, that they call for the eradication of all Jews, which is not true, and that they're trying to you just kill as many as they can, blah blah blah. So when we form them as these savages, it leaves no room for any discussion, any nuance whatsoever. And now that the United States has delegated them as a terrorist group, you can't even bring them up without bringing, you know what I mean, on yourself this idea that anything that I say could probably be used against me to say that, oh, I was aiding and abetting a terrorist group, which is, they just shut down the whole discourse. So you have to be extremely careful in now how you frame any discussion. It's done on purpose to just vilify the Palestinian side completely, to justify the atrocities and the continuing occupation, because they don't want the occupation to end. They don't want a solution. Netanyahu never wanted it. None of the modern Israeli leaders wanted it. So here we are.
And
I think
I
what
really don't think that our leaders are really helping in this regard either, right? Where when they support a regime like Israel and what they're
No.
doing in terms of vilifying Palestinians or even equating them to terrorists, making them seem like they're not worthy of their own lives, then that's where we start to get hate crimes, where people are like, hey, look, their lives don't matter at all. And you have a child being stabbed to death in multiple places. Canada, United States, you have other crimes being committed all the time. Like I don't even know what to say to that. It's unfortunate that that's literally what hate ends up leading to, and it's sometimes in some ways basically supported and caused by the actions of our own leaders who are not standing up for justice how they should be. That being said, now we also have, like for instance, when we now try to stand up against what some of our leaders in our countries will say, and we try to show a different narrative, you find there's a lot of censorship going on. And I know that Zoobia, you were talking about something along these lines as well, where when you try to speak out against it, then suddenly you have the potential of losing your job and so on. But tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I think there are obviously reports from all over, especially Western world that stood for free speech a lot. And, within the medical field, especially, I think a lot of us have to decide. I personally decided, had to ask her questions, what do we have to lose? And everybody had to decide for themselves. I personally have not so far, seen much backlash, but from my work and all of that. But it's not support either, right? Because we have seen how the response came from, like the war in our recent memory on Ukraine was. But then we have heard from students within our university how they have been treated. So they have been, if they're trying to, or the students who've been trying to arrange walkouts from their schools, right? So public schools. So they have been told that it's kind of political, and they say, like, everything we do have been political. How come this is not allowed? Many physicians have lost their jobs. because they have posted, and they don't, they didn't post any hate, content, but instead they just asked a question or they supported Palestine. And it happened very fast, right? But then, if they consulted with the lawyer or something, they were reinstated in many cases, but in some cases they were not. So I think that has been come to a surprise to a lot of people, that how come we are not. So I'm in contact with a bunch of students and residents and medical students who have been trying to, and obviously they have more to lose, right? They have more to lose that if they speak up. But we are obviously trying. Some of us have been trying. We are trying to respond to, and it's not just that. Medical journals, for example, they would publish things that are just outright, you would think, are false representation, right? So there have been several articles that have come out in last 3-4 weeks that are just completely one-sided. They collected signature, and in one of the leading journal Lancet, the condemnation of Hamas, but they declined the similar letter for ceasefire, right? So they declined that letter to be published. There was an article in JAMA, which is also one of the leading journals, that they published, and I wrote with one of my colleagues a response to it, and I got a response yesterday. Well, it just came out online, and it has to come out on, in print, and then after 4 weeks, then we'll tell you what to, if we will publish your response to it or not. So it's uh-huh.
Sorry, go ahead.
So it's that kind of, these kind of things that, even, and then American Medical Association, they actually shut down their process of, so American Medical Association, a lot of young doctors are part of that. And it's one of the biggest, advocacy and medical associations of physicians in, all over the world. And so they shut down the process and it's just calling for ceasefire, right? It's not like anything controversial. And the fact that there have been so many such an attack on healthcare workers, right? It's such an attack on hospitals, the whole narrative of the tunnels and everything, human shields, which we can discuss separately. Why is that such an absurd thing? But that has been shut down. I have personally reached out to one of and they have like 160,000 membership of that medical organization, and I was given an excuse, like, if we start making statement about Palestine, then we have to make a statement about Congo, and then we have to make a statement, and then they deleted their statement about Ukraine. And I went to the top person. So I haven't responded to the rest of the team yet, but you see these kind of like, and it's not somebody who doesn't know about this conflict or something, like they're oblivious about it, like they knew, they know about colonization and all of that, with given their background, but they decided not to. And we see this in multiple medical organizations, and the suppression of the facts, and the responses from the medical universities and other, you guys have seen probably that it's usually very one-sided, lopsided. So yeah.
It's just very sad because people make this situation out to be more about perception, right? That it depends on how the Muslims look at it, or it depends on how a Jewish person looks at it. Oh, they'll find ways to justify this and justify that. But the fact of the matter is it's one of those situations that if anyone were to study, it would be so clear cut to them in terms of where the injustices, who's perpetrated what are the problematic actions our own countries have taken. All that becomes crystal clear. And it's just simply, honestly, it's just sad to see that even the likes that we've seen online, Ben Shapiro, some of the facts that he's been putting out there, so-called facts, people have been debunking them so easily, like they just have no basis. If anyone's even ascribed to Norman Finkelstein, you'll notice every time Ben Shapiro opens his mouth, he has a comment to make about it, and he lists all of the places where he's completely false. And it's sad that people like that, like him and others, have been so bought out that regardless of their intellect level, regardless
But
of
Manu,
their
it's
own
not just
humanity.
it's just not them being bowed out. I think it's just and I think it's just going back in history. It's always these organizations. If you look at that's what they were never on the right side and of the history, right? So they were always, they wanted to stay on the comfortable side, and I think that's what we have to understand, that they're always people like that, and we have to decide for ourselves what are we willing to lose. Because you gave
Mhm.
example of Norman Finkelstein, he lost his tenureship, right?
Exactly.
He lost a lot, right? And he said one interview, he stopped even talking about it in 2020, right? He says like nothing is going to change, and now the poor guy has lost his voice. But I think
Well,
this
I
is
would,
the time. I think a lot of things will need to rearrange, inshallah, after this is done, because I don't think this can continue. And one last thing, I think in our community, one thing that we talked offline, that we are seeing, ugly face of hate even from physicians and stuff like that. And what it does is it erodes the trust of the community within the systems that people need to trust in, right? And we have a very checkered
yeah,
history, especially here
absolutely.
in Baltimore,
So
with our African American communities and all of that. And if we continue to like this, it further, and we restore to some degree how many times we have done these trainings on diversity, anti-racism, and all of that. And just imagine, like, all of these people now sitting on top of these positions, all of these diverse people, they're participating in all of this genocide, right? They don't even want to call it genocide. It's one of the students from across, that they're just like, the one of their supervisors told me it's not a genocide. It says, look up the definition. And I asked him, so did you? And he said, yes, I did. So really, these are the times we live in. It's just that there was rhetoric, but there is no action there. And I think this is the
yeah,
time we
and
push back. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? So, I mean, I think everyone here, we all the question is out the window, like that we have to, speak up for Palestine, and we have to get more involved in our communities, and we have to change the narrative, right? I think no one here disagrees that, right? However, from my experience, not every Muslim community believes that, right? And from my experience, they have big name shaykh from the Khadij in particular that they quote to back themselves up, right? So, like, there's this guy on TikTok, he's from Amarat, right, saying that it's haram to boycott, for example, right? Or you have the infamous fatwa of a lot of the Salafi shaykh, that's haram to protest, right? And from my experience, there still is a good population of Western Muslims who hold on really tight to this narrative, right? And they not only do they refuse to do anything, they shame others who are doing something, right? This, in my opinion, what's going on right now is one of the first times I've ever seen conservative MSAs teaming up with SJPs. Like, one of the first times we see this. So usually they don't like each other, right? For various reasons, right? Usually, from my experience at least, right? But now we see MSAs finally working together with SJPs on campus or in local organizations. But there still is this loud voice in the Muslim community that's saying, no, this is haram. No, the only way Palestine will be free is when we go back to Tawheed, or this type of narrative. So how would you respond to that? Because that's something I face a lot in my community, and it's very frustrating. But how can I deal with this?
Anwar, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. You don't want to protest? Don't protest, ya akhi. The fatwa was issued in the Khalij. If I was in the Khalij, I probably wouldn't protest either. Protest is not seen as something viable in those areas because it's a very cultural type of thing. Whereas in America, and I'm bringing in, I want to use my Southern Texas, kind of in America, we protest. Protest is how we get things done. In fact, we have it. It's written into our Constitution. The First Amendment allows you to protest wherever for whatever cause you want. It's not something seen as illegal. Whereas I understand from his perspective, just to be religiously clear, technical, what can a person do if they're living in a Muslim country? Well, we have a nasiha, where the Prophet ﷺ, he says in the hadith, الدين النصيحة قل لمن يا رسول الله قال الله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم. Right? He said nasiha, which is giving advice, but it actually means to deal with each other in a very transparent and truthful manner. Because if I'm being truthful to you, that means I'll tell you how things are with you or with me or with whatever's going on, without sugarcoating, without anything else. So it says that we should do that with our leaders as well, أئمة المسلمين. So the problem is, if we want to apply this hadith, there's no mechanism that the leaders themselves have put into place where we can actually offer that nasiha. I can't go and walk up to somebody and give them nasiha anyways, right? There's so many layers to jump through, so many, and they're not even going to listen to it. And if somebody does offer them nasiha, he gets put into jail, right? How many scholars are in jail now in a lot of these countries? How many people have been imprisoned for just speaking up and saying something, of the truth? They're saying, hatta one of them, he was just saying, like, we don't like these vices. This is not about it. And immediately they go on the minbar and they took him out. So, the status of our ummah, Allah musta'an, we have to realize that there are people that are paid money to issue certain fatwas that befit certain regimes, right? And if you're smart, you can figure out what we're talking about. That's the bottom line. Whereas for America, get an American fatwa, and that's why all of them have said, in fact, protests are good. These are peaceful protests, by the way, that we're talking about. We're not talking about riots. We're not talking about, damaging property or taking lives. We're not talking about anything. We're peaceful assembly, peaceful protest. That's what we have been doing. In fact, this is why a lot of the scholars will show up to these and give their support to them. I've gone to so many, alhamdulillah, and I'll continue to go. It's a responsibility, I think, religious responsibility to show up, as well as it's a civic duty as citizens of this country that we live in. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention. In terms of the whole, if the people of Palestine were upon Tawheed, this would have never have happened to them, is such a false, like, it doesn't make any sense. Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu was upon Tawheed, him and 120 members of his family, and they were slaughtered in Karbala. Was his Tawheed improper? No, of course not. He was let down by people who promised him that they would help him. That's literally what happened, and that's the end of the story. It has nothing to do with his Tawheed, right? Palestinians have been let down by so many, people. And unfortunately, what's happening is that, Palestine is always, it's interesting. The Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, that there's a hadith that says, whoever lives on one of the coast of Asham, the coastal area, he's in a continuous ribat until the Day of Judgment. Now, it has some weakness, this hadith. It's in Tabarani. But why is it a land of ribat? Because it's always at the forefront of any foreign invasion, right? And it's also the place where all foreign invasions stop. The Mongol invasion stopped in Palestine. The Crusades stopped in Palestine. But they also began, many of them, the Crusades began in Palestine as well. Colonialism began in Egypt and Palestine before they got anywhere else in the Muslim world. So the idea that why the Palestinians, it has nothing to do with their Tawheed, because what happened to them eventually will happen to other places. And subhanAllah, it was the same people who said, oh, this would never happen to us. And then look at Syria, look at Yemen, look at, you name the country, and subhanAllah, there's all these problems and things that nobody would have guessed, like what happens in Libya to be happening now, or what's happening in, may Allah protect all of our countries. I'm not saying that, like we wish any evil upon them. No, bil'aks, to the contrary, we hope that all of our places experience prosperity and peace and the ability to practice Islam, to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The idea is Palestine is in the beginning, not because of a lack of Tawheed, but because this is what's happening to the entire Ummah. And when we realize that, then we realize that as an Ummah, we have to be better, yes. But as an Ummah, we also have to have each other's back. I can be upon pure Tawheed and I can still be martyred. I can be upon pure Tawheed and still have something terrible happen to me. so many of the companions died during the fitna. Were they all not upon Tawheed? Of course they were. And they died at each other's hands. So this whole notion of, well, if they fixed their Tawheed, bro, like there's a scholar from one of these countries who said, oh, these people need to be talking to their people about proper hijab and about proper Tawheed. Not literally, he said hijab. I'm like, man, his people are being slaughtered and subjugated to the worst living conditions ever. And that's really what your focus is? You don't even know what he's going through, man. Wallah, I know for a fact if he were in his shoes, he'd be saying the same thing that the guy that he's criticizing is saying. This is why ultimately we don't listen to the critics. Don't listen to the critic. The critic is not in your place. This is literally what they are. They're the critics. They're like in Ashab al-Sabt, you know the story of Ashab al-Sabt, where there were three groups. You had the people who transgressed, and the people who tried to fix it. They said something, and you have the third group that criticized the people who said something. They said, why are you saying something? Why are you wasting your time? Don't. Just leave them alone. And it's, are you serious? And don't be that critic. Allah was quiet about what happened to the critic, meaning we don't know if they were punished or not. Most likely they were probably punished in a certain way, not that they were turned into monkeys, but something else. Regardless, like the critic is the worst of all of these people. And so unfortunately that's what we have online, is you have a lot of these famous, fatwa issue. They're critics, armchair quarterbacks who have no idea what's going on. Allahu musta'an. Sorry, I got a little passionate there. I'm just,
No, I didn't think people took those jokes seriously. I never.
I don't think so either. I think, you know what? Actually, to comment on that, subhanallah, this is one of the good things that has been coming out of this, is that people show their true colors. Mm-hmm. People are now identifying themselves. And by the way, this is one of the signs that we're closer during the times of fitna. That one of the wisdoms why Allah allows his fitnas to happen is because it shows you who's a hypocrite and who isn't, and who's upon the truth and who isn't, and who's sincere and who isn't, who's the person who puts his money where his mouth is, and the person who doesn't, who's just a talker. And it's showing us exactly that. So alhamdulillah for everything, you know what I mean? It's to allow us to know who's our friend and who's our enemy. So yeah.
It's interesting. I was just with you guys on the weekend for some classes in Dallas, and on my way back, I remember we were at the security checkpoint, and my son looks up to a series of like 8 or 10 flags above those security checkpoints, and he's like, "Hey, that's a Palestinian flag." Two thoughts came in my mind. One was, keep it down. Let's try to get home safely and not get in trouble over here. and it's unfortunate, but that's one of the thoughts that definitely crossed my mind. And the second thought that crossed my mind is that, like, for me to even think in that manner, it's sad that we can't stand up for justice, and we feel like we don't have that right to speak out and use our rights, right? That we have the freedom of speech. And why is it that it's being censored? Now the question comes. I know all of us in our own capacity are doing what we can, but let's hear from you guys, and I want to hear about what you guys are doing in your own communities to bring attention to this issue. I'm going to start with Anwar. Let's go in the same order.
So, alhamdulillah, in our community, as an imam, we have reminders almost on a daily basis. We're doing dua al-qunut every day. I tell people, the first thing that we should be doing is dua, not the last thing, because it shapes our mindset, it shapes our mentality, it shapes our attitude. We this whole thing has taught us, if there's any lesson to take out, is to see the reliance of the people of Gaza on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how it's unshakable, and how they've realized that everybody near and far has abandoned them. Not like the people, obviously we're talking about the country's people who can do something are not doing anything. Obviously the people, everybody's heart is with the people of Gaza, we know this. But they're like, look, because our trust is in Allah alone, we're not asking anybody of anything. Right? We're just that tawakkul, that's proper tawheed. Right? Not this, you know what I mean, tawheed that's just preached, you know what I mean, using fancy poetry and language, but not actually acted upon. That's a tawheed that you cannot teach in a classroom setting. That's tawheed that comes from living through one of the most difficult situations you can ever imagine, which is why it's unbreakable, subhanAllah. And that's why Allah blesses them in ways that we can't even imagine. So we start with that dua, you know what I mean? That tawakkul upon Allah, and then everything else, whether we speak up, use whatever tools that we have at our disposal, social media, talking to people that we know in person, protesting, reaching out to senators, congressmen, people in power, lobbying, boycotts, wallahi, whatever we can is what we should be doing. And so as an imam, I'm just trying to encourage people to not listen to the doubters or the critics, but to continue doing. I believe that specifically, and I know I'm excluding Manu here, but I think Canada has a hand in this too. Our taxpayer money is going to fund this, which is why I believe we have an added responsibility. We're not just Muslims who are living outside of Palestine. We're, unfortunately, our money that we're paying is going to fund that, which is absolutely terrible. We have to voice our objection to this, that we do not agree that it should be used for this. So we have an added responsibility. So if a person says, no, I'm not going to do anything, you're aiding in an injustice now, because if you don't do anything, and Allah knows best.
Sohail, go ahead.
I just I thought of something that when you asked about occupation, what is it like? I never lived there, but I've visited, many times. And I just wanted to point out a few things that I experienced personally, while I have the chance here. So the first is when I get there in the airport, and I have a U.S. passport, born here, grew up here. I'm set aside in the Arabs and Muslims only corner of the Tel Aviv airport. You'll see like Desi people from Europe and and if they're Muslim or Muslim looking, that's where you go. But there's one thing that was interesting to me. The last time I was there, in 2022, I think it was, I was taking the light rail from one part of from the old city of Jerusalem to kind of the outskirts, and I was running because the last train is right around 11 p.m. and I was running to get there and to catch the train, and people told me don't run. Like, not like don't run at this in this area, or don't run and carry something, don't put your hands in your pockets. Just don't run, because you could get shot doing that, And this is not in Gaza. And that's in Jerusalem, and in the West Bank, whether it's included in the West Bank, Jerusalem, but outside of the walls, when you're in the West Bank is even worse than Jerusalem. And Gaza, the conditions are worse there. So I just wanted to mention that because, as I have my American passport in my pocket and I'm told don't run. Here your rights are limited. So to your question about what we're doing, to be honest, I don't feel that I'm doing enough. I have been trying to be more mindful about my, ibadah and dua. I've been trying to share news that I've been coming across or interviews as widely as I can. I went to the protest in DC, which I don't think I've ever seen that many people at anything in my life. Mashallah, it was quite amazing. There's protests here as well. Quite a bit smaller. I live in Ann Arbor, near Detroit, kind of 40 minutes away or so. Detroit has some bigger ones, Ann Arbor not so much. But primarily that's the majority of what I've been doing, trying to check in on my family who lives there. A sister of mine lives in Jerusalem right now. She has for the past 20 some years. Yeah, I mean, I hope. I've never been inside Gaza. I hope that when this is over, inshallah, I'll be able to go and just help, do whatever I can, move rubble, whatever I can do. Inshallah, I'm able to go in there at some point. So
Just okay. Naveed, go ahead. I think you might be on mute.
Oh, Naveed, it says refresh your page. It says your browser is preventing recording. Oh, we lost him.
Maybe he'll come back. I don't know if that works.
Hopefully.
Okay. Let's hear from Zoobia.
Yeah. So I kind of felt bad that I didn't do before much. You always have supported Palestine, but I think something that triggered me was actually the message from our university president. He completely erased the Palestinians. Completely. That just 2 days I was just like very, very upset. And then obviously I responded to him. And then I said before, I think I thought, what little capital I have built socially or professionally, I think, this is the time, whatever, what do I have to lose? So I never used my social media before. I just had a little Twitter account just to follow like medical studies, like, because authors kind of write down. So I just started using it more actively. So, so there's certain things I started doing in professional capacity and then personal capacity. So in personal capacity, definitely I started investing more into, tweeting things. And I knew I had people, and I didn't, at some time I realized that people obviously from other sides were following and then engaging with them in respectable manner. And then with my family, obviously calling the senators and going to the protest, we are actually doing a little. And in my personal capacity, I've noticed if Americans knew people I have run into, met as my patients or colleagues, people who have been to Palestine or who have read about it, they always are sympathetic. They always knew the reality. So I created this thread. My son actually created a little movie about it. So we've been sharing that, and now we're going to start like door-to-door campaign in our neighborhood. We have a little Palestinian flags with a little message on it. So inshallah, this weekend, my kids are gonna go door to door, and we're gonna do this little campaign. And it's a simple thing, you're putting flag in your lawn, right? So things like that to just educate people. And then definitely in our professional capacity, I think just talking to people around you. Just be, I try to wear, Palestinian color hijab to my work, wear my Free Palestine pin, let my patients talk about it, right? And just, for some people it's an angle that, America needs to spend money here and not outside. For some people who know Palestine, it's about that. And then, I've written a couple of papers. We have now a group of physicians who we are just trying to organize. We're just gonna, have a protest, have a press conference, or we're just gonna write open ads and papers and op-eds and all of that. So yeah, so we're trying to do things and whatever in our capacity, and continue to educate people in our community, and see how we can help here. As Imam Anwar said, we have more responsibility in this regard.
As long as we're all working to do something, I think, as long as we're not sitting around doing nothing, every little bit's going to help for sure. Basically, like I don't want to end this in a more sad note or anything, but the more you look at these images come out of the children who are suffering, you look at the father who's lost multiple children, you look at all these tragedies that have happened, and it's just, you can't even see them anymore. Then you think, you're like, while I don't want to see them, these are people who have to go through this day in and day out for over a month now, and it's become a bit of a ritual almost, that I get sad every night and I have to shed tears every night because of the injustice that's out there and the fact that no one's standing up for these people. And it's like, if we're all humans and we were supposed to have some level of humanity, how is it that we're letting one group of people go like this when we agreed that we would never allow this to happen ever again? So I put the question out there. It's because of all that's going on, and if we don't help each other, then it's kind of like who's going to help us then, right? But how are you guys all coping with what's going on, Anwar?
It's been tough. Right now we're getting news that they're inside the hospital. Their
Yeah.
tanks are on the ground. Just to be clear, this is a symbolic thing. It has no bearing whatsoever on anything. For them, they have their mission accomplished moment. Just like W. Bush, in Baghdad, they said, "Oh, when we take over the airport, that's mission accomplished." Like, what mission are you talking about, dude? You destroyed a country. And same thing with these people. They just want to show their people, "Oh, look, we mission accomplished. We got to the hospital. Now we can leave." Yeah, the family there is going through a hard time. Absolutely terrible. Lack of fuel, lack of food, lack of water. They celebrate when they get some fresh water nowadays, and just the living conditions. They're all huddled together. So there's about 70 of our family members that are all living together in a 3-bedroom chalet. So it's not even a house. It's meant to be like a place that people go to, kind of like to vacation, even though there's no such thing as a vacation. But a piece of land there, and people have people sleeping on the stairs. Um, there's no electricity, no internet, no, you know what I mean? They're running out of food. We're able to stay in touch with some of them because we got some of them eSIMs, and American numbers. So we're staying in touch with them, not through their Palestinian numbers, but through their American ones. And so we're more fortunate than so many other people. And even then, it's absolutely stressful. So yeah. And I'm talking about, with direct family there. I know everybody's going through this together, all of us, even if you don't have relatives there, we're just all in a constant, just daze. Like, you're just looking at everything happening. You're like, what is, like, it doesn't make any sense. Wallahi, on some days it's not even registering that this is actually happening. Allah musta'an.
Yeah, it definitely has been difficult. I was feeling irritable yesterday, um, and I ate a burger, you know, and I felt my body physically relax, you know, and I was with my cousin later on that day, and I took him some food, and he was like, he said the same thing. Sometimes I get kind of irritable when I don't eat for a while. And we were quiet for a second, and he's like, the people of Gaza, like, we haven't eaten for a few hours, and we're affected by that. It's been, yeah, I mean, like, it kind of has been, I think, like waves, emotionally. Like, it comes more sometimes than other times. I teach driving, and um, I had a break at one point, and I saw a video that was shared on the group, uh, of these kids who, I mean, one of them literally looked like a zombie. Like, I've never seen anything like it, like a zombie that you would see in a movie, but it was a real life kid who was barely alive. And I went into the bathroom, and I saw it, and I just you know I just broke down for a little bit. But I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, I don't know, I how to cope. I'm not sure. Make that, and that, remember that, the ones who lose their lives are shuhada, and the ones who don't lose their lives are also going to be rewarded. I mean, Uh, that's about all I can say.
And Zoobia, how have you been coping?
Yeah, I think some days are okay, some days are not so good. Um, I think what I've been gathering my like tempering my responses to a lot of the news that coming in. I just taught Surah Al-Hujurat the other day. I think just, just the fact that, being a student of knowledge, we have to do these things. So that we teach, I think just taking lessons for our own self, because it does make you quite a bit better. And then it does become depressing quite a bit. But I'm part of group where we obviously talk to people from Gaza. And I think just hearing their stories give you this purpose that you have to keep on taking their stories forward. I'm writing about this Dr. Ibrahim Matar from, he's a physician in the middle of Gaza, and just what he has written, like I have to narrate his story because obviously he doesn't have time for that, but his words need to get. So just looking at all of that, I think then that gives me purpose that okay, I need to keep going. But just looking at news, I think those are the things, just looking at the people, how they've been coping gives you sub strength. But otherwise, yeah, otherwise it can just be so demoralizing. So part of the day could be like that, part of the day could be just, it can hit you different ways. Yeah.
And Naveed, in light of all the atrocities that are going on, have you been kind of processing it, dealing with it, coping with it?
It's very tough, obviously. It's not easy. Anyone who's a sane human being, when you see children, bodies of children, right, stacked up like they're bags of rice, right, it takes a toll, obviously. But I think the main thing, I've seen so far 3 videos where literally you have people who lost anything and everything, and all they're doing is saying Alhamdulillah. All they're doing is saying du'as. All they're doing is praising Allah, and it's just like wow, like what are these people made of? Like it, like here in the West. I mean, to be honest, it's like you lose your Wi-Fi and your iman drops. Like that's how fragile our iman is here, right? Versus these people have lost so everything, right? And all you hear, I mean, there's so many videos online you can use an example, right? They're just saying Alhamdulillah, like that's the only thing they're saying, and it's just like you look at that and you just feel ashamed at your own self. You feel ashamed that look how fragile we are in our iman, right? Something bad happens to us, we lose something or we don't get a job or whatever it might be, and immediately the first question is, God, why me? The first question is, why is Allah doing this? Why this? Why that? Right? Whereas these people, like, quite literally, they're just like, Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I had 2 sons. Both of them are shahada. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I had a brother. He's dead. Yeah, Alhamdulillah. It's almost like it's like this is a movie. Like I can't even believe these are real people, right? It's as if like you read this stuff in Sirah, you read this stuff in history, you read this stuff about the Salaf, but then you actually see it in real life. It really hits you very differently. So I think I try to balance out the gory videos with those types of videos because it really seeing the iman on the ground. And to be honest, like I would say in my du'as, my personal du'as, I emphasize more on, Ya Allah, protect their youth and protect their iman, protect the iman of these young people, because what this is doing is causing generational trauma. What this is doing is it's really causing these young. There was a video of this young kid who was crying his eyes out. He was saying, one of my friends, his brain was popping out of his skull or something, right? He's like, this is not life. This is not. He's saying not to be, of course, but he's saying this is not how life should be. What this war is doing is causing insane amounts of trauma that will definitely affect the iman of this next generation that's coming out of Gaza, right? So one of my main du'as is like, Ya Allah, protect their iman, right? Protect their iman, because I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a child. You're just playing soccer, for God's sake, and then a bomb just comes out of nowhere, drops and kills your friend, right? And then you log on to, maybe it's a generational thing, but you log on to like TikTok, and then you see a guy dressed up as a sheikh in the Middle East saying, "Oh, it's this is happening because your tawheed is not correct." What are you gonna think? What are you gonna think about Islam? What are you gonna think about tawheed? You're gonna resent it, right? So that's my biggest concern. And I'm sorry my computer kind of messed up, but on the question you asked previously about what I'm doing, I'm trying my best to combat the narrative. I'm trying my best to combat the religious narrative that's coming out of certain Muslim countries. So whether that's giving talks, giving Jummah khutbahs that are completely unfiltered, like I don't care if I get banned, I don't care if the masjid board doesn't like me, I don't care whatsoever. Like alhamdulillah, I have financial independence from my Islamic work, right? Try to, say yes to any speaking occasions I can get, right, to educate people. And then even if people, I was challenged during a recent talk I had at the University of Buffalo, right, by non-Muslims, by Muslims, right, when I just spoke really what I believe is the truth, right, about Muslim countries, about protesting, about these things. And I was challenged head on, right, by people, and I don't really care, right? I guess the moment I start caring, I go on social media and I see pictures of these, innocent children that were killed with my tax dollars, right? And I stop caring automatically. And I just kind of channel that anger to productivity, right? Whether it's posting on social media, I've gotten people angry. I honestly don't care, right? People can unfollow me. I don't care, right? I definitely got masjid boards angry. Let's just say that. And quite frankly, I don't care, right? I've definitely gotten people at MSAs angry. And again, I don't care because the truth means more to me than your shallow opinion based on what some social media figure from the Khalij is telling you. So that's really how I've been coping and how I've been responding to all of this.
That's a great way to channel it, and making the best of a horrible situation, to be honest. But on that note, I'm going to actually ask Anwar to close us off with a dua.
Actually, can Brother Naveed close us out? And I liked his dua that he was making before. I want him to close. I've been talking too much in the podcast anyways.
لك الحمد والسماوات والأرض ومن اللهم لك الحمد أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please help the people of Gaza, help our brothers and sisters who are suffering in Gaza and Palestine and throughout the Muslim world. Oh Allah, please help the Muslim youth, help the youth of Gaza, protect their iman, Ya Allah, protect their iman, protect their lives, but most importantly, protect their iman, Ya Allah, protect their iman. Oh Allah, guide us to the truth and allow us to follow the truth and make clear to us what is false and allow us to stay away from falsehood. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow our hearts to be united. Oh Allah Azza wa Jal, guide our youth. Oh Allah, guide our youth, whether it's in the east, whether it's in the west, guide our youth to true Islam. Ya Allah, do not let any of this affect the iman of our youth. Oh Allah, do not allow any of this to affect the iman of those young children who have lost everything that they ever had. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, strengthen the Muslimin. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unite the Muslimin. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, guide the Muslimin. Oh Allah, expose the hypocrites. Oh Allah, expose the hypocrites for who they are. Oh Allah, remove the hypocrites for who they are. Remove the hypocrites. And oh Allah, allow us to be, allow everything we do to be accepted in our skills of good. Oh Allah, even if we do not live to see the liberation of Palestine, allow all of our actions to play a huge role in liberating it. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unite us and enter us into the highest levels of paradise. Oh Allah, those young children have returned to you as shuhada and green birds flying around enjoying Jannah. While we are here still in the midst of this test, please do not allow our iman to falter. Oh Allah, do not allow our iman to falter. Allow us to die on La ilaha illallah. Oh Allah, allow us to live on La ilaha illallah. And oh Allah, allow us to pass on La ilaha illallah in its truest meaning to our next generation, to our youth, to our children. And oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, forgive us for our errors, our sins and our shortcomings. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala nabiyyina wa habibina Muhammad walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
Jazakallahu khairan. And Jazakallahu khairan for being here today. I appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.